Hello, my dear gardening friends. Sometimes when we come into somebody's garden and we see wonderful collection of different magnificent, well taken care of the plants, but for some reason our eyes keep moving from one plant to another, and there is this sense of dullness, sense of no interest in the space. And very often it is because there is no focal point in that garden design. So today, in this video, we are going to talk about what focal point is, why do we need focal point in our landscape, how to achieve it, and I'm going to walk you around my garden and show you my attempts at creating focal points in my landscape. So what is a focal point in the garden? Well, focal point can be any object, plant, piece of furniture, construction, which attracts our attention, which has a commanding influence on the landscape, which makes the area where it is present well organized, very interesting to our eye, and has a tendency to attract our attention to that object. For example, here in my somewhat dull in the winter, this monotonous wall of sticks. This area I can see from my kitchen window when I do dishes. So what I did for this area, I placed here a winter wreath. By the way, it has a little bit of snow here right now. We had our first snow for the first time this year. Exciting, but it melted very quickly. So this area got its focal point temporarily just for the winter, and every time when I look outside, my eyes right away go to these beautiful red berries and the wonderful texture of these leaves and needles. Why do we need focal points in our gardens? Very often when we are, let's say, when serious gardeners are there and they love to collect one type of plants, let's say rosarians, we love roses and we want to have a lot of them, there is a tendency that we are going to have rose collection in our garden space. And as a result, each rose will be magnificently beautiful, but there will be no cohesive design to that space. We will be just moving from one bush to another, and there will be no interest and excitement. So we do have to have a lot of different focal points in our garden if we have a big territory, or several if our space is limited. But even the smallest space can benefit from this strong object which commands our attention, which makes us excited to explore the garden, which makes that space well organized. Focal points do have their functions in the garden. Probably the biggest function is they do attract your attention. And when the focal point is well placed, you look at it right away and you start to look how beautiful this arch is. I consider this construction to be the focal point in this area. So right away your eye is attracted to this construction, and you're not going to look at that somewhat awkward shaped shrub there, or you're not going to look past all these shrubberies here and see the back houses, my neighbors. Your eye is going to be attracted to this very unusual structure, and you're going to study it. This way, you're not going to see other, I would say, unwanted corners in the garden. Another feature which focal points have in the garden, they kind of put space together. Without focal points, our gardens look kind of unorganized, not easy to enjoy. Everything is all over the place. The presence of mass is there, or haphazardness. But when there is a strong focal point, all the space looks like it comes in well together. It plays together in harmony. All the different elements kind of come together. And very often when gardeners talk about focal points, right away we kind of get stressed out about it, because there are no strict rules how to do it. Gardeners would love to know, okay, this is how I do the focal points, 1, 2, 3, that's how it's done. But this, the story of focal points and how to do them can be quite complicated to grasp for gardeners, especially for beginner gardeners. So here in our next chapter, we are going to talk how to do it successfully. When we have dull spaces, for example, something like this here, before this constructed arch or I don't know what, twig structure, rose support was put here. This area, consider this area to be very dull. You walk in this entrance between two apple trees and you hit this dull yellow wall. And I was always unhappy with it because there was nothing for the eye to see and there was no focal point, there was no interest here. So this fall, I created this focal point here. I planted a rose here, and it's a very strong grower. It's Katrina rose, and hopefully in 2 or 3 years, this area will be occupied by a magnificent rose. So every time when you're coming in, you will see this display here, this strong point. And I'm sure my eyes, every time I will see this rose here blossoming, my eyes will get all excited about it. So how do we create a focal point? Basically, the easiest approach to this somewhat difficult problem is you take something which is very interesting, which is contrasting to its surrounding in shape or color or size or tone. For example, you can place a cement ball near vertical Siberian irises growing. So the vertical shape of irises will really contrast with the spherical shape of a bowl. For example, here you have this very monotonous, repetitive shape of shingles on the house, and then this different structure, which is different in shape and texture, I think plays here very well. And this area now is exciting, and I can imagine in a year, even this year, when little Katrina rose will start growing here, maybe next year it will produce first blooms, this area would be so interesting. In another corner of my garden here, my raspberry patch, this area was totally dull and flat and nothing exciting was happening here. I have here this wattle fence, but it wasn't pulling the area through. So I decided to build this kind of fragile construction here, but because it's so light, it's not going to be taken down by the snow. I'm not sure if you can see it very well. Sun is into my face right now. And suddenly all this area is being transformed because I have this vertical, very strong focal point, and our attention is not running to this little storage area here. Our attention is being focused right here on this structure, and we are not focusing on the area behind there, which is very functional area. I have a path there to my compost bins. So who wants to see that? Everybody are going to see this construction. And then in spring we're going to have a lot of foliage here because my raspberries are going to grow here. And suddenly this area is interesting also, thanks to this very strong focal point. The good thing about focal points is that they can be movable objects. I do love those cement spheres which you can place with upright growing plants. For example, look here at this corner. I'm going to develop this area. This is going to be an exciting project here. But if you will look here at this corner and you will suddenly realize there are no chairs, let's say there are no chairs. This corner would be so boring. You wouldn't even know where to put your eyes on. This would be just a dead space. But since this area is occupied by these chairs, and I can sit here and look at my garden, these chairs add a focal point to this corner where your eye will stop at them, will admire the fact that they do not get ruined during the winter, that I always appreciate in these fake wicker chairs. And they stay here year-round in this corner to pull it through. I am planning to have a conversation with my kids and try to develop this area. This is an area where they play soccer. And for now, the conversation is not going anywhere. The negotiation is not happening. They want the grass. They don't want this area to be, nothing to be done to this area. So for now, these chairs are going to stay here and serve as a focal point and also be very functional here because we love to have our morning tea here. Points can be very seasonal, especially if focal points are plants and they are not evergreens. For example, this beautiful generous gardener rose right now. She's looking quite according to the season. Almost all the leaves are lost, but in summer it is a beauty. And when you come here, right away you see this wonderful, beautiful performance here. And you're not looking at anything else here. You're looking at this rose. And this arch is symbolizing the transition to another area of the garden, which is behind here. It's kind of an area where we do a lot of bins. It's a service area. Garbage bins are there and all that stuff. So focal points can also symbolize that there is a transition coming in the garden. You follow focal points with your eyes and you follow from one garden room to another. So this probably can be a very good example of a focal point which is seasonal. Right now your eye is not drawn to it. It's not really a very pretty sight right now. Rose, the generous gardener, is in dormant stage. It's December right now. But in summer, it's a beauty here to behold, and everybody's eyes are looking at this rose. A well-placed focal point is well received from all around, from different angles. And for example, here I have beautiful Lady of Shalott. Again, right now, you can see through and not even notice that this is a rose here. But in summer, this Lady of Shalott is well seen from this angle. I see Lady of Shalott from my house. I see Lady of Shalott from my den or my sunroom. And when I'm in the garden, this Lady of Shalott here as, I would say, my best performing rose in the garden. Also a wonderful focal point when you come in from that corner or from that corner. Right away you see this beauty right here, commanding all the attention with its beautiful performance. Lady of Shalott has wonderful orange roses at the beginning, and in my climate this rose slowly changes into soft pinks at the end of its blossoming season. You know, some people can overdo it with accessories, with focal points, and you have to be careful about it. You don't want to introduce too many focal points in your garden because then you will have this very busy, I call it Chachkarized environment, where your eye doesn't know where to look because everything is so exciting and so big and so interesting and so colorful that you get this overloaded effect, and that is not good for gardens as well. And the last thing which I wanted to mention in this video about focal points is that when you have a focal point in the garden, make sure that you give that focal point a space. Meaning you don't cover it, you don't crowd it with plants. You make sure that there is enough space for that focal point to stand strong and tell everybody, this is me. You'd better look at me because I'm so cool and I organize all the space and I'm have a very strong presence here. So if you want to have a focal point, we don't crowd it, we don't hide it behind other plants. We put it right there for everybody to see it, and hopefully we do a good job and all this place will play well because that focal point commands the space. Oh, snow is cold and wet. I'm going to go inside the house. Wishing you a lovely day, happy gardening, and I will see you next time.